The arrow struck Xander Donovan's shoulder, just as he raised his sword to deliver what should have been the killing blow, and the pain sent him stumbling backward into the mud-churned battlefield, where bodies lay scattered like broken dolls beneath the fading autumn light. His vision blurred with agony, but through the haze he saw the orc warrior he had been fighting collapse to her knees, her own wounds too severe to continue the fight, chains still wrapped around her wrists from whatever hell she had escaped before finding herself on this blood-soaked field. The battle raged around them, humans and orcs locked in violence that neither side truly understood anymore. But in that moment, Xander saw something in the orc woman's eyes that made him lower his sword. Not fear, not hatred, but a bone-deep exhaustion that mirrored his own. She was massive compared to human women, easily 6.5 feet tall with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the world, her green skin marked with scars that told stories of survival against odds that would have killed lesser beings. Her tusks were small but prominent, jutting from her lower jaw, and her dark hair was braided back from her face in a warrior's practical style. Blood seeped from wounds on her arms and torso, and the chains binding her wrists were cutting into her flesh, leaving raw, angry marks that spoke of days or weeks of captivity. She stared at him with eyes the color of burnished copper, waiting for the death blow that never came. "Get up," Xander said through gritted teeth, his own blood soaking through his leather armor. "Get the hell up and run." She blinked at him, confusion crossing her features. Around them, the tide of battle was shifting as the human forces gained ground, and Xander knew what would happen to any orc taken alive, especially a female. The things they did to prisoners were not acts he could stomach, not after 3 years of this senseless war. "I said run." He jerked his head toward the tree line to the east, where the forest grew thick enough to hide even someone her size. "Before they see you." The orc woman struggled to her feet, swaying dangerously, the chains making her movements awkward. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then seemed to think better of it. With a last glance at Xander that he could not quite decipher, she turned and limped toward the forest, moving faster than her injuries should have allowed. He watched her go, his shoulders screaming with every beat of his heart, wondering if he had just made the greatest mistake of his life or performed the only decent act in years. Then his own legs gave out, and the world went sideways. Xander woke 3 days later in the medical tent, fevered and delirious, calling out warnings about chains and copper eyes. The field surgeon told him he was lucky the arrow had missed the major vessels, though the wound had gone septic and nearly killed him anyway. They kept him in the medical camp for 2 weeks, pumping him full of bitter herbs and changing his dressings while he drifted in and out of consciousness. When he finally regained his senses properly, the battle was long over, the orc forces scattered and driven back into the wild territories beyond the frontier. The commanding officer came to see him on his last day in the medical tent. Captain Marsh was a hard man worn harder by war, his face a map of old scars and older regrets. "Heard you got careless, Donovan. Arrow to the shoulder is a rookie mistake." "Got distracted," Xander said, which was true enough. "Well, shake it off. War's not over just because we won this battle." Marsh studied him with eyes that had seen too much. "You've done your duty and then some. 3 years is a long tour. If you want your discharge, I can have the papers drawn up. You have land waiting, do you not?" Xander did, in fact. A homestead on the eastern frontier, granted to him when he enlisted, though he had never seen it. 20 acres of wilderness that needed clearing, a day's ride from the nearest settlement. It was not much, but it was his, and right now the thought of never seeing another battlefield appealed more than he could express. "I will take the discharge," he said, Marsh nodded slowly. Cannot say I blame you. Get out while you still remember what peace feels like. He paused at the tent flap. Watch yourself out there on the frontier. It is Orc territory still, technically. The treaty lines are fuzzy in those parts. I can handle myself. That arrow in your shoulder says different, but suit yourself. Marsh tossed him a small leather pouch. Your pay and discharge papers. Try not to get killed by the very thing you spent 3 years fighting. The pouch landed on Xander's cot with a heavy clink, and then the captain was gone, leaving him alone with the weight of what came next. It took Xander another week to gather supplies and arrange transport to the frontier region where his land waited. He bought a sturdy horse, tools, seed for spring planting, and enough provisions to last through winter. The merchant he purchased from gave him a skeptical look when he mentioned his destination. That is deep frontier country, the merchant said, shaking his head. The war might be over, but the Orcs did not get the message. They still raid the outlying homesteads. You sure you want to set up there alone? I have been fighting for 3 years, Xander replied. I can defend my own land. Fighting an army is different from fighting raiders in the night, just saying. But the merchant took his coin anyway and wished him luck he would probably need. The journey east took 4 days of hard riding through country that grew progressively wilder. Xander passed through the last settled village on the 3rd day, a cluster of rough buildings surrounded by a wooden palisade where suspicious eyes tracked his progress. Beyond that, the road deteriorated to a rutted track, then to game trails, and finally to nothing but wilderness broken occasionally by the skeletal remains of abandoned homesteads where optimistic settlers had tried and failed to establish themselves. He found his land by the crude markers. The land office had described a lightning-split oak on the north border, a creek forming the western boundary, and a rocky outcrop to the south. The eastern edge was unmarked forest that stretched for miles into Orc territory. The land itself was beautiful in a harsh way, rolling meadows interspersed with stands of timber, the creek running clear and cold through the middle. There was even the foundation of an old cabin, partially collapsed but still salvageable, near a natural spring. Xander made camp that first night beside the ruins, too tired to do more than unsaddle his horse and start a fire. He sat watching the flames as darkness settled over his land, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Closer by, something large moved through the underbrush, making him reach for his sword before the sound faded away. He was alone out here, truly alone for the first time in years, and the solitude was both terrifying and liberating. Sleep came hard and restless, full of dreams about copper eyes and chains. Morning brought reality in the form of endless work. The old cabin foundation was sound, and some of the original timbers were still usable, which saved him considerable effort. Xander threw himself into the labor of rebuilding, cutting timber from the forest, hauling stone from the creek, mixing mud and straw for chinking. His shoulder ached with every swing of the axe, but the pain felt clean compared to the sick hurt of a battlefield wound. This was the pain of creation, not destruction. 3 weeks passed in a blur of physical exhaustion. The cabin took shape slowly, rising from the ruins like a promise of the life he might build here. He worked from dawn until dark, stopping only to eat and tend his horse. At night he collapsed into his bedroll too tired for dreams, which suited him fine. It was on the 23rd day, when he was hauling a log to the cabin site, that he noticed the tracks. They were enormous, far too large to be human, pressed deep into the soft earth near the creek. Xander knelt beside them, his soldier's instincts kicking in. Orc tracks, unmistakably, and fresh enough that water was still seeping into the depressions. His hand went to his sword as he scanned the tree line, but nothing moved in the afternoon shadows. The tracks led toward his camp and then away again, following the creek upstream into denser forest. Someone had been watching him. Xander spent the rest of the day hyper-aware of every sound, every movement in his peripheral vision. He positioned his camp so his back was to the half-built cabin wall and kept his sword close. When darkness fell, he built up the fire larger than usual and sat with his back against the logs, watching the forest. Hours passed. The moon rose, 3/4 full, silvering the landscape. Xander's eyes grew heavy despite his wariness, his body demanding the rest he had denied it. He was just beginning to nod off when he heard the soft crunch of a footstep on fallen leaves, too deliberate to be an animal. He was on his feet with his sword drawn before his conscious mind fully registered the threat. "Show yourself." For a long moment, nothing. Then a figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the firelight, moving slowly with hands raised in a gesture of peace. It was an orc woman, and even before she stepped fully into the light, Xander knew. She looked worse than when he had last seen her on the battlefield. The wounds she had taken in that fight had healed to angry scars, but new injuries marked her body, a deep cut across her ribs, bruises darkening her green skin to almost black in places, and her left leg dragging slightly as she walked. The chains were gone from her wrists, but the marks remained, infected and raw. She wore only rough leather pants and a torn shirt that had seen better days, and she was dangerously thin, her ribs visible beneath her skin. "You," Xander said, because no other words would come. "Me." Her voice was deeper than a human woman's, rough as gravel but not unpleasant. "I did not think you would remember. Hard to forget someone you could have killed but did not." He kept his sword up, though he was not entirely sure why. She looked like she could barely stand, much less pose a threat. "What are you doing here? Your land borders clan territory. I have been watching to see what kind of human took this place." She swayed slightly, catching herself. "I should not have come. I will go." "Wait." The word came out before Xander could stop it. She froze, looking at him with those copper eyes that seemed to catch and hold the firelight. "Are you wounded? That is not your concern." "Maybe not, but you look like death warmed over." Xander lowered his sword slightly. "Why were you watching me?" She was quiet for a long moment, and he thought she might not answer. Then, quietly, "You let me live. I wanted to know why." "Would you prefer I had killed you? It would have made more sense." She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture so human and vulnerable it made his chest tighten. "Humans do not show mercy to orcs. Everyone knows this." "Well, I did. So now what?" "Now nothing. I go back to the forest, you continue building your house, we pretend this meeting never happened." But she did not move, and Xander realized she was shaking from cold, from pain, or from exhaustion he could not tell. "Those wounds need attention. The marks on your wrists are infected. I will manage." "You do not look like you are managing." Xander made a decision that was probably stupid but felt necessary anyway. "Sit down. Let me at least clean those." "Why would you?" "Because I have medical supplies and apparently a death wish for common sense." "Sit." She stared at him as if he had started speaking in tongues, but after a moment she limped to the fire and lowered herself awkwardly to the ground. Up close, Xander could see the full extent of her injuries. The cut across her ribs was deep and should have been stitched days ago. The bruises covered her arms and torso in varying shades of black and purple, and the marks where the chains had been were a horror of infection and raw flesh. "Who did this to you?" The question came out harder than he intended. "My clan. When they discovered I had been saved by a human instead of dying with honor, they cast me out. Some disagreed with the decision. There was violence." She said it flatly, as if discussing the weather. "That is the way of things." Xander fetched his medical kit, trying to process that information. She had been punished for surviving, for accepting mercy. The unfairness of it made his jaw clench. He knelt beside her and began cleaning the wounds on her wrists with water heated over the fire, working as gently as he could manage. She flinched at the first touch, but then went very still, watching him with an expression he could not decipher. "This is going to hurt," he warned before applying the antiseptic tincture the field surgeon had given him. She made no sound when he did, though her hands clenched into fists. Xander worked in silence, cleaning and bandaging the wounds with care learned from too many battlefield injuries. The cut on her ribs needed stitching, but he was not sure he had the skill for that without causing more damage. He settled for cleaning it thoroughly and binding it with clean cloth. "You should see a healer," he said. "There are no healers for outcast orcs. I will heal or I will not. That is a grim way of looking at things. It is a realistic way." She looked at him as he tied off the last bandage. "Why are you helping me?" Xander sat back on his heels, considering the question. "Same reason I let you go on the battlefield, I suppose, because I am tired of cruelty, because you look like you need help. Pick your reason." "Those are not good reasons. I am an orc. You are human. We are enemies." "Are we?" "Right now, sitting here, are we enemies?" She opened her mouth, closed it again. "I do not know." "Then let us table that question for later." Xander stood and retrieved his water skin and some dried meat from his supplies. "Eat something. When is the last time you had a proper meal? Days? Maybe longer." She took the offered food hesitantly, as if expecting it to be snatched away. When he just went back to tending the fire, she ate with the focused intensity of someone truly starving, trying to pace herself but failing. Xander busied himself checking his horse and arranging his bedroll, giving her privacy to eat. When he glanced back, she had finished everything he gave her and was watching him again with that intense, unreadable stare. "What is your name?" he asked. "Grukara. Though I do not know if I still deserve to use my clan name." "Grukara." He tested the unfamiliar sounds. "I am Xander. Xander Donovan, formerly of the King's 3rd Regiment, currently of this plot of wilderness that apparently borders on your clan's territory." "Formerly of the clan lands," she corrected quietly. "I have no territory now, right? Sorry." They sat in awkward silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Grukara stirred. "I should go before dawn. It is not safe for either of us if I am seen here." "Where will you go?" "There is a cave network in the hills. I have been staying there." She struggled to her feet, moving easier now with her wounds cleaned and her belly full. "Thank you for the food and the medicine. I will not forget this kindness. Grukara." She paused at the edge of the firelight. "If you need help again, you know where to find me." That is a dangerous offer to make. Seems to be my specialty lately. She almost looked like she might smile at that, but then she was gone, melting into the forest shadows as if she had never been there at all. Xander sat watching the darkness for a long time after, wondering what he had just started. The next week passed without incident. Xander continued working on the cabin, making good progress now that the walls were rising. He found himself looking toward the forest more often than was probably wise, but he saw no sign of Grukara. The tracks by the creek disappeared after a heavy rain, and he began to wonder if their midnight meeting had been some kind of fever dream. Then, on the 8th morning after their encounter, he woke to find a freshly killed deer hanging from a tree near his camp. It was expertly butchered, the hide already removed and the meat cleaned and ready for preserving. Xander circled it slowly, looking for any sign of who had left it, though he already knew. There were no orc tracks this time. She had been careful, but there was no one else in these woods, who would leave him such a gift. He spent the day preserving the meat, smoking it over a slow fire and packing it in salt. It was far more than he could use immediately, enough to supplement his supplies for weeks. As he worked, he kept glancing at the forest, half expecting to see her watching from the shadows, but she did not appear. That night, he left out a bundle of clean cloth bandages and some of his remaining medical supplies at the edge of the clearing, weighted down with a stone so they would not blow away. In the morning, they were gone. So began a strange sort of exchange. Every few days, Xander would wake to find something left for him: game meat, wild herbs, firewood already cut to length and stacked neatly. In return, he would leave out things he thought she might need: food from his supplies, spare clothes that would be far too small for her but were better than nothing, medicine, even a small blanket he could spare. They never crossed paths, never spoke, but it felt like a conversation nonetheless. The cabin was nearly complete when winter arrived in earnest. Xander had managed to get the roof on and the door hung before the first snow fell, turning his land into a pristine white landscape that was beautiful and deadly in equal measure. He spent those early winter days fortifying his shelter, banking the walls with earth for insulation, and laying in firewood until he had enough to last until spring. The work kept him warm, but he worried about Grukara out there in her cave, facing the brutal cold with inadequate shelter and supplies. He told himself it was not his problem. She was an orc, she was hardy, her people had survived winters for generations before humans ever settled this land. But the worry gnawed at him anyway, especially on nights when the wind howled like a living thing and snow piled in drifts against his cabin walls. 2 weeks into winter, during a brief break in the weather, Xander made a decision. He loaded up his pack with supplies: warm furs, preserved food, medicine, flint and steel, and a small cooking pot, and set out following the creek upstream into the hills where Grukara had said her cave system was located. The tracks from their first meeting were long gone, but he had learned to read the land well enough during his time here. He found signs of passage: a broken branch here, disturbed leaves there, and followed them deeper into increasingly rough terrain. He found the cave entrance as afternoon was fading to evening, a dark opening in a rocky hillside that was well concealed by overhanging brush. Xander paused at the entrance, suddenly uncertain. This was her space, her refuge. Was he violating something by coming here uninvited? Before he could decide, a voice came from the darkness. "I can hear you out there, thinking very loudly about whether or not to enter." Xander jumped, cursing under his breath. "How long have you known I was coming? Since you crossed the frozen section of the creek." Grukara emerged from the cave, and Xander was relieved to see she looked better than their last meeting. The wounds had healed, though the scars remained angry and prominent. She had gained back some weight, filling out her frame, and her eyes were clearer. "Why are you here?" "Brought you some things, for winter." He held up the pack. "It is going to get worse before it gets better." She stared at the pack, then at him. "You climbed into these hills in winter to bring me supplies. When you say it like that, it sounds stupid. Because it is stupid. You could have frozen to death, or fallen and broken something, or been attacked by a winter bear. These hills are dangerous. So I am learning." Xander shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how cold he was getting standing still. "Are you going to let me in, or should I just leave this here?" Grukara studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come, before you lose your toes to frostbite." The cave was larger than he expected, the entrance opening into a chamber big enough to stand in comfortably, even for someone Grukara's height. She had made a small camp in one corner, a fire pit, with smoke venting through a natural chimney in the rock, bedding made of pine boughs and furs, and her few possessions arranged neatly against the wall. It was sparse but surprisingly comfortable looking, warmer than he expected thanks to the fire and the insulating rock. "This is nice," Xander said, setting down his pack. "Better than my cabin before I got the roof on. It serves." Grukara fed more wood to the fire, and in the growing light, Xander could see her more clearly. She wore better clothes now, leather pants and a thick tunic that he recognized as having been part of his offerings. It still fit poorly on her larger frame, but it was warm. "You should not have come all this way, probably not, but I was worried." The admission came easier than it should have. "Winter is brutal out here. I am orc. We are built for harsh conditions. That does not mean you have to suffer through them alone if you do not have to." Xander began unpacking the supplies, laying them out. "I brought furs, they are thick and warm. Food, you have been keeping me well supplied, so it is only fair. Medicine, though you look like you are healing well. And this." He pulled out the cooking pot. "Figured you might not have one, and it makes a difference for winter meals." Grukara looked at the spread of supplies as if she had never seen anything like it. "This is too much." "It is what I can spare. Take it." "Why?" The question was almost anguished. "Why do you keep helping me?" "I am nothing to you. We are nothing to each other." Xander met her copper eyes. "Because someone should. Because you deserve basic kindness. Because you have been helping me too, and I want to return the favor." He paused. "Because when I look at you, I do not see an enemy. I just see someone trying to survive, same as me." She was quiet for so long he thought he had said too much. Then, very softly, "No one has ever spoken to me the way you do." "What way is that?" "Like I am a person. Not an orc, not a warrior, not a tool of the clan, just a person." The simple truth of that statement hurt something in Xander's chest. "You are a person. That should not be revolutionary." Grukara turned away, but not before he saw the shine in her eyes. "You should stay tonight. It is too late and too cold to make the journey back to your cabin safely. The temperature will drop badly after dark. I do not want to impose. You brought me enough supplies to last weeks. The least I can do is ensure you do not die of cold on the way home." She moved to her bedding and began rearranging things. "You can have the sleeping furs. I will sit by the fire. We can share them, if you are comfortable with that." Xander held up a hand at her startled look. "Just for warmth. I have spent enough nights on campaign to know that body heat makes a difference in serious cold, but only if you are comfortable." "I am comfortable," she said after a moment. "And you are right about body heat. It would be practical." They ate a simple meal of roasted meat and the bread Xander had brought, sitting on opposite sides of the fire. Conversation came slowly at first, stilted and awkward, but gradually eased into something more natural. Grukara told him about growing up in the clan, about learning to fight as soon as she could walk, about the pride of being chosen for the war band. Xander talked about his village back west, about joining the army to earn land, about the disillusionment that came from 3 years of killing people he did not actually hate. "I do not hate humans," Grukara said quietly. "I never did. I fought because that is what was expected. Because to refuse would be to dishonor my clan, but I did not hate. I think most of us were the same. Just doing what we were told, what was expected, makes you wonder what we were actually fighting for. Land, resources, pride, the same things all wars are fought for." She poked at the fire. "My clan was starving. The human settlements had pushed us out of our traditional hunting grounds. When the clan leaders said we would fight to reclaim them, what choice did we have? I did not know that." Xander frowned. "We were told the orcs were raiders, monsters threatening peaceful settlers. And we were told humans were invaders destroying our ancestral lands. Perhaps the truth is somewhere between." She looked at him across the fire. Strange how talking can make enemies into something else. What are we now if not enemies? I do not know. But I know you make me feel safer than I have felt in a very long time, and that terrifies me almost as much as it comforts me. The honesty in her voice made Xander's heart skip. I know what you mean. They sat in companionable silence as the fire burned down, then arranged the sleeping furs together. It was awkward at first, figuring out how to share the space when their sizes were so different, but eventually they settled with Grukara's back to Xander's chest, his arm draped carefully over her waist. She was warm, almost hot to the touch, her body radiating heat like a furnace. Your people are very warm, Xander murmured. Orc blood runs hot. It is how we survive harsh conditions. She shifted slightly, getting comfortable. Does it bother you? No, it is nice actually, like having my own personal fire. He felt more than heard her quiet laugh. I have been called many things, but never a personal fire. They fell quiet, and Xander listened to her breathing slow and deepen as she drifted toward sleep. He lay awake longer, acutely aware of her presence, of the trust implicit in her allowing him into her space this way. Something was growing between them, something that should not exist, but felt more real and solid than anything he had experienced in years. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, and he had no idea what to do with it. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him too, and he slept better than he had in months. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through the cave entrance, and the smell of something cooking. Xander woke to find Grukara already up, making some kind of porridge over the fire using the pot he had brought. She glanced over as he sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The snow stopped. You should be able to make it back safely if you leave soon. She did not look at him as she spoke, focused intently on stirring the pot. Right. Yes. Xander stood and began gathering his things. The awkwardness from the night before was back tenfold, neither of them quite knowing how to navigate what had happened, or had not happened, technically, but felt significant anyway. Grukara served up the porridge in wooden bowls, and they ate quickly. When Xander finished, he packed up and moved to the cave entrance, pausing there. Thank you for letting me stay, and for the food. Thank you for the supplies, and for coming all this way. She stood in the center of the cave, her hands clenched at her sides. Will you come back? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Do you want me to? Yes. Simple, direct, honest. Yes, I do. Then I will come back, Xander smiled. When the weather allows, and you are still welcome at the cabin anytime, the door is always open to you. That is dangerous to offer. Seems to be my specialty. This time she did smile just a little. Go, before the weather turns again. The journey back to his cabin took most of the day, but Xander made it safely, collapsing into his own bed exhausted but satisfied. He spent the next week snowed in, waiting out a storm that dumped another 2 feet of snow over the landscape. During those long, quiet days, he found himself thinking about Grukara constantly, her laugh, her honesty, the way she had felt in his arms, warm and solid and real. He was falling for her. The realization should have terrified him more than it did. She was an orc, he was human, and their peoples had just finished killing each other in a brutal 3-year war. Any relationship between them was impossible, forbidden, dangerous for both of them. But somehow none of that seemed to matter as much as the way his heart lifted at the thought of seeing her again. When the storm finally broke, Xander woke to find tracks in the fresh snow leading up to his cabin. He opened the door to discover a bundle of furs left on his doorstep, expertly prepared and warm. Inside the bundle was a small carved figure, a bird in flight, rough but charming, clearly made with care. He held the carving carefully, running his thumb over the smooth wood. She had been here, close enough to touch his door, but had not knocked. He wondered if she had hesitated, if she had almost come inside but lost her nerve at the last moment. Xander spent the day carving his own figure, a wolf, because she reminded him of one, strong and fierce and beautiful. When night fell, he made the journey back up to her cave, following her tracks in reverse. She was waiting at the entrance when he arrived, as if she had known he would come. "I brought you something," he said, holding out the carved wolf. She took it carefully, studying it in the moonlight. "You made this. Not as well as you made the bird, but yes. It is wonderful." She looked up at him, and in her copper eyes he saw everything he was feeling reflected back at him. "Come inside. It is cold and we should talk." They sat by her fire, and Grukara turned the carved wolf over in her hands. "I am afraid," she said quietly. "Of what? Of this. Of what I feel when you are near, of how much I have come to need your kindness." She set the carving down carefully. "I was cast out for accepting mercy from a human. If my clan discovered I had feelings for one, they would kill me on sight, and your people would do the same to you. I know." Xander reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. It was huge compared to his, calloused and strong, but it trembled slightly at his touch. "I am afraid too, but I am also tired of being afraid, of letting fear dictate how I live. I have spent 3 years fighting in a war I did not believe in. I am not going to spend the rest of my life hiding from something that feels right just because other people say it is wrong." "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I care about you, that I think about you constantly, that I would like to see where this could go if you are willing." He squeezed her hand gently. "I am saying that you make me feel alive in a way I have not felt in years, and I am tired of pretending that does not matter." Grukara stared at him, her breathing unsteady. "You are asking me to choose you over everything I have ever known. No, I am asking you to choose yourself. Choose what makes you happy. Choose a future where you do not have to survive alone in a cave because your people punished you for having the audacity to want to live." He paused. "But I am also saying that if you do choose yourself, I will be here, for as long as you want me." She was quiet for a long time, and Xander forced himself not to fill the silence, to let her process. Finally, she turned to him fully, her copper eyes bright with unshed tears. "I choose you. I choose this. I choose happiness, even if I do not fully understand what that means yet. We will figure it out together." She leaned forward, and Xander met her halfway, their foreheads touching in a gesture that felt both intimate and sacred. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, existing in a space that was theirs alone. "I do not know how this works," Grukara whispered. "Orc customs and human customs are different. I do not want to do this wrong. There is no wrong way. We will make our own customs." Xander pulled back enough to look at her face. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, and pressed his lips gently to hers. She was unpracticed, uncertain, her tusks making the angle awkward, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the soft sound she made, the way her hand came up to cup his face with a gentleness that contradicted her warrior's strength. They kissed slowly, carefully, learning the shape of each other. When they finally pulled apart, Grukara was smiling. "That was nice. Nice, very nice." "More than nice. I do not have words," she laughed, the sound bright and surprised. "I never thought I would have this. Neither did I." Xander settled beside her, their shoulders touching. "Stay with me, not here but at the cabin. I have room, and it would be warmer than this cave. We could spend the winter together properly." "Are you certain? That is a big step." "I am certain. We can take things as slow as you need, but I do not want you out here alone anymore. Let me take care of you the way you have been taking care of me." Grukara leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that was already becoming familiar. "All right. Yes, I will stay with you. They spent one more night in the cave, wrapped together in the furs, talking about everything and nothing until sleep claimed them both. In the morning, Grukara packed up her few belongings, and together they made the journey down to Xander's cabin. The walk took longer than it should have because they kept stopping to look at each other, to marvel at what they were doing, but eventually they arrived at his homestead. Xander opened the door and gestured her inside. "Welcome home." Grukara stepped over the threshold slowly, looking around at the space he had built with his own hands. It was simple, one large room with a sleeping area, a cooking area and space for storing supplies, but it was solid and warm and his. "This is yours, ours if you want it to be." She turned to him and there were tears on her face. "I want that very much." The first few days of living together were an adjustment. They circled each other cautiously, learning how to share space, negotiating everything from how to arrange the sleeping area to who would cook meals. Grukara was used to fending for herself and did not take easily to being cared for, while Xander had to learn not to hover or treat her like she was fragile. They had disagreements, small conflicts over nothing important, but they worked through them with the same honest communication that had brought them together in the first place. Slowly, the cabin stopped being just Xander's space and became theirs. Grukara carved decorations for the walls, small figures and patterns that added beauty to the simple room. Xander built her a chair sized for her larger frame, so she would not have to crouch uncomfortably. They established routines, morning chores done together, meals shared by the fire, evenings spent talking or carving or simply existing in comfortable silence. The physical side of their relationship progressed slowly. They kissed often, growing more confident with practice, and slept wrapped together every night. But both were cautious about pushing too far too fast, aware that what they were building deserved time and care. Grukara had never been with anyone, orc or human, and Xander wanted her first experience to be right, not rushed. One night, about a month after she had moved in, they were lying in bed when Grukara spoke into the darkness. "I love you." Xander's heart stopped, then started again triple time. "Say that again." "I love you. I did not know what that felt like until now, but I am certain this is love." She propped herself up on her elbow, looking down at him in the dim firelight. "I love you, Xander Donovan, and I needed you to know I love you too." He reached up to cup her face, running his thumb along her cheek. "I have for a while now, but I was afraid to say it." "Why afraid?" "Because once I said it, it would be real, and real things can be taken away." She leaned down and kissed him thoroughly. "I am not going anywhere. You are stuck with me. I can live with that." They made love that night for the first time, gentle and exploratory, learning each other's bodies the way they had learned each other's hearts, with patience and care and wonder. Afterward, lying tangled together, sweaty and satisfied and slightly giddy, Grukara laughed. "What is funny?" Xander asked, running his fingers through her hair. "Everything, us. This. The fact that 6 months ago we were on opposite sides of a battlefield, and now I am lying here so happy I could burst." She turned to look at him. "How did this happen?" "You mean, how did I get lucky enough to have you fall into my life?" "We are both lucky. Against all odds, impossibly lucky." "Then let us never take that for granted." Winter deepened, turning the world outside their cabin into a frozen wonderland that was beautiful and deadly in equal measure. But inside, Xander and Grukara built a life together that was warm and full of small joys. They cooked together, worked together on projects to improve the cabin, told each other stories of their pasts, and slowly healed the wounds that war had left on both of them. Grukara proved to be an excellent hunter, keeping them supplied with fresh meat even in the depths of winter. Xander taught her to raid, laboriously working through the few books he owned, and delighted in watching her discover the magic of written stories. They carved together, developing their skills, and began planning what they would plant in spring when the land thawed enough to work. It was not perfect. Grukara still had nightmares about her casting out, waking in a panic before Xander could soothe her back to calm. Xander sometimes woke from dreams of battle, reaching for weapons that were not there. They both carried scars, physical and otherwise, that would never fully fade. But they carried them together, and that made all the difference. One evening in late winter, as they sat by the fire carving, Grukara spoke up. "What happens when spring comes? What do you mean? When the weather breaks and travel is possible again? When hunters or settlers or soldiers might come through this area." She set down her carving. "We cannot hide here forever." Xander had been thinking about the same thing. "No, we cannot. Eventually someone will see you and questions will be asked. Your people will not accept us together. They will try to take me or kill me or punish you for harboring an orc. Then we will leave before that happens. Head deeper into the frontier or north into the territories where neither human nor orc law holds sway. Find somewhere we can live in peace. You would give up your land. The home you built. I would give up anything to keep you safe. The land is just land. You are my home now." Grukara's eyes were bright. "I do not deserve you. That is the stupidest thing you have ever said. You deserve everything good in the world, and I plan to spend my life trying to give it to you." She launched herself at him, nearly knocking them both over, kissing him with an intensity that made his head spin. "Then we will go north when spring comes. Find our own place where no one cares that we are different. Together. Always together." They spent the rest of winter making plans. Xander began stockpiling supplies that would travel well, preserving extra food and repairing their gear. Grukara scouted the northern routes, using her knowledge of the wilderness to map out a path that would avoid both human settlements and orc territories. It was risky, but remaining where they were had become impossible now that they knew what questions spring might bring. As the snow began to melt and the first hints of spring appeared, they prepared to leave. Xander felt a pang of regret looking at the cabin he had built, the land he had earned through 3 years of war, but when he looked at Grukara, the regret faded. She was worth more than any piece of land could ever be. They were loading the last of their supplies one morning in early spring when they heard voices in the distance, human voices, multiple people, moving through the forest toward the cabin. Xander and Grukara exchanged a look. They were out of time. "The cave," Grukara said. "You can say you have seen no orcs if they are looking. I will hide there until they leave." "No, I am not doing this without you." Xander moved to her side. "If they are going to judge us, they can judge us together." "Xander, that is suicide." "If they see me, they will attack. Then let them. I am done hiding what you mean to me." Before Grukara could argue further, a group of men emerged from the tree line. There were 5 of them, dressed in traveling clothes and armed, their eyes going wide when they spotted Grukara standing beside Xander. "Get away from that orc," one of them shouted, raising a crossbow. "Are you injured? Did it attack you?" "Lower your weapon," Xander said calmly, stepping in front of Grukara. "She has not attacked anyone and she is not going to. It is an orc. Get out of the way so we can deal with it. Her name is Grukara and you are not dealing with anything. This is my land and she is my guest." The men exchanged confused looks. Their leader, a grizzled man in his 40s with the bearing of an ex-soldier, lowered his crossbow slightly. "Your guest." "That is what I said. Sir, I do not think you understand what you are harboring. That thing is dangerous. We have been tracking it since yesterday after it killed livestock in Millerton." "That is a lie," Grukara said from behind Xander, her voice steady. I have not been near any human settlement and I have killed no livestock. I have been here all winter. It talks. One of the younger men said, sounding shocked. Of course she talks. She is not an animal. Xander kept his voice level with effort. And if there is an orc raiding livestock, it is not her. Like she said, she has been here with me since before the snow. The leader studied them both, his expression unreadable. You are claiming you have been living with an orc, voluntarily. I am. Do you have a problem with that? Legally, I should. Fraternizing with the enemy is against the settlement laws. I could arrest you both. The war is over. There is no enemy anymore. Tell that to the families who lost people in the raids. Tell that to the children who watched their parents die. The leader's voice was hard. The war might be over officially, but out here on the frontier, memories are long and grudges longer. I know. Xander met the man's eyes. I fought in that war. I saw the things done on both sides. But killing each other in revenge is not going to bring anyone back or make anything better. At some point, someone has to be first to choose something different. And you think you are that someone. You and your pet orc. She is not my pet, Xander said, letting anger creep into his voice. She is my partner, and yes, we are choosing something different. If that makes us criminals in your eyes, so be it. The leader was quiet for a long moment, studying them. Finally, he sighed and lowered his crossbow completely. Stand down, he told his men. We are not here to start trouble with a veteran on his own land. But sir, the orc did not raid Millerton. I can see that now. It has been here all winter. Those tracks are old. Whatever hit the settlement is still out there. He looked at Xander. You are making a mistake, son. This will not end well for either of you. Maybe not. But it is my mistake to make. Fair enough. The leader gestured to his men. We will continue tracking the actual raider. But word of this is going to spread. You might want to consider moving on before someone less understanding comes calling. We were already planning to leave. We will be gone by week's end. Smart man. The leader paused before turning away. For what it is worth, I hope you find somewhere you can make this work. Everyone deserves a chance at happiness, even if it comes in a form the rest of us do not understand. The group moved off, heading north into the forest. Xander and Grukara stood watching them go until they disappeared from sight, both breathing hard from adrenaline. That was close, Grukara said quietly. Too close. We need to leave now, not in a week. Pack everything essential. We leave at first light tomorrow. They spent the rest of the day in a flurry of activity, packing only what they could carry and preparing to abandon everything else. Xander felt the loss of the life he had been building here, but when he looked at Grukara working beside him, he knew with absolute certainty that he was making the right choice. That night, their last in the cabin, they lay together in the darkness. Are you sure about this? Grukara asked. Once we leave, there is no going back. You will be giving up your claim to this land, your place in human society, everything you worked for, I am sure. Besides, I am not giving anything up. I am trading it for something better. He pulled her close. A life with you is worth more than all the land in the kingdom. I will spend my life trying to be worth that faith. You already are. They left at dawn, their belongings packed on the horse Xander had bought what felt like a lifetime ago. He took one last look at the cabin, then turned north toward the wild territories and never looked back. The journey was hard, traveling rough country with spring mud making every step treacherous, but they traveled together, and that made it bearable. They followed Grukara's planned route, skirting both human and orc lands, heading into the deep wilderness where few people of any species ventured. The land grew rougher and more beautiful, mountains rising in the distance like the bones of the earth pushing through its skin. They saw no one for weeks, just endless forest and clear streams and the occasional wild animal. Finally, After nearly a month of travel, they founded a valley nestled between mountains, with a river running through it and meadows that would be perfect for farming. It was isolated, defensible, and beautiful in a way that took Xander's breath away. "This is it," Grukara said, standing on the ridge looking down at the valley. "This could be home. Then let us make it home, together." They descended into the valley and began the work of building a new life. It was harder without the partially completed cabin Xander had started with at his homestead, but they had each other and the skills they needed. They built a shelter first, then expanded it into a proper cabin over the course of the summer. They cleared land for planting, working side by side in the mountain sun. They hunted and foraged and preserved food for the winter to come, and they were happy. Deeply, completely happy in a way neither had ever imagined possible. The isolation that might have driven some people mad was a blessing for them, a chance to build their life without interference or judgment. They developed their own routines, their own traditions, creating something that was neither fully human nor fully orc, but uniquely theirs. One evening, as summer faded to autumn, they sat on the porch of their cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Grukara leaned her head on Xander's shoulder, a gesture that had become second nature. "I have been thinking," she said, "dangerous." She elbowed him gently. "Seriously, I have been thinking about the future, about what we want from this life." "What do you mean? Do you want children?" "I know humans and orcs are different species, and I do not know if it is even possible, but I wanted to know if you had thought about it." Xander was quiet for a moment, processing the question. "I had not really considered it, to be honest, but now that you bring it up, yes, I think I would like children, if it is something you want. I do. I want a family with you, even if we have to figure out what that looks like as we go. Then we will try, and whatever happens, we will face it together, just like everything else." Grukara turned to look at him, her copper eyes reflecting the sunset. "I want to bond with you. In the orc tradition, partners who wish to commit to each other perform a bonding ceremony. It is similar to what humans call marriage, but more permanent. Once bonded, you are considered one unit, one soul in two bodies. Tell me what it involves." "We would need to speak vows to each other, exchange gifts that represent our commitment, and then bind our hands together with cord while speaking the old words. It would be just us, no witnesses needed, and once done, we would be bonded for life in the eyes of my people. Then let us do it. Let us bond." Xander took her hands in his. "I am already yours for life, but I want to make it official in whatever way is meaningful to you." They performed the bonding ceremony the next day, in a clearing beside the river with the mountains as witnesses. Grukara taught Xander the words in her language, and he repeated them carefully, binding himself to her with vows that came from the heart. She gave him a blade she had forged herself, the handle carved with symbols that represented protection and love. He gave her a necklace he had made from stones he had collected throughout their journey, each one representing a moment they had shared. When they bound their hands together with cord made from leather and thread intertwined, representing the joining of their two peoples, Xander felt something shift in his chest. This was real, permanent, sacred. He was bound to Grukara in a way that transcended law or custom or the opinions of anyone else. They were partners, committed to each other for the rest of their lives, and nothing would ever change that. "I love you," he said when the ceremony was complete. "My bondmate, my heart." "I love you," she replied, and the joy in her voice was radiant. "My bondmate, my home." They spent their first bonded evening celebrating simply, cooking a special meal and dancing awkwardly to music only they could hear. Later, they made love with a tenderness and intensity that left them both breathless, sealing their bond in the most intimate way possible. As autumn deepened and winter approached for the second time since they had met, Xander and Grukara prepared their valley home for the cold. They had more than enough supplies laid in. The cabin was solid and warm, and they faced the coming season with confidence. But more than that, they faced it together, bonded in a way that made them stronger than either could have been alone. On the first night of the first snowfall, they sat by their fire wrapped in each other's arms. "Do you ever regret it?" Grukara asked quietly. "Giving up your old life for this?" "Never. Not even for a moment." Xander kissed her temple. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though I am an orc and you are human and we should be enemies. Especially because of that. We chose love when it would have been easier to choose hate. We built something beautiful when everyone said it was impossible. That makes what we have more precious, not less." Grukara was quiet for a moment, then said, "I am pregnant." Xander's mind went blank. "What? I am pregnant. I have been certain for about a week, but I wanted to wait to tell you until I was sure." She turned to look at him, and there was fear in her eyes beneath the joy. "I know we did not know if it was possible, and I do not know what to expect, but it is happening. We are going to have a child." Joy exploded in Xander's chest, so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. He pulled Grukara close, holding her as tightly as he dared. "A child. We are going to have a child. Are you happy?" Happy does not even begin to cover it. "I am terrified and thrilled and so full of love I feel like I might burst." He pulled back to look at her face. "How are you feeling? Are you well? What do you need?" "I am well. Tired and my body is already changing, but well. And what I need is for you to not hover over me like I am made of glass. I am still strong, still capable. I know. But you are also carrying our child, and I am allowed to be protective." She smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "You are going to be such a good father. And you are going to be an amazing mother." They spent the rest of the evening talking about the future, about names and what the child might be like, about how they would raise it with the best of both their cultures. It was exciting and terrifying in equal measure, but they faced it the way they faced everything together, with love and determination. The pregnancy progressed smoothly over the winter months. Grukara's body changed in ways that were both familiar and strange, her orc physiology making some aspects different from human pregnancy, but the fundamentals the same. She remained strong throughout, continuing to hunt and work until late in her term, though Xander finally convinced her to take it easier as her belly grew large. They prepared as best they could for the birth, gathering supplies and researching everything they could from Xander's limited medical knowledge and Grukara's memories of births in her clan. They knew they were taking a risk, bringing a child into the world with no healer or midwife, but they had no other option. This was the life they had chosen, and they would make it work. The child came on a spring morning, just as the valley was waking up from winter. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Xander feared he might lose them both, but Grukara was strong. She endured the pain with a warrior's determination, and after hours of struggle, she brought their daughter into the world. The baby was perfect. She had her mother's green skin and pointed ears, but her father's eyes and more delicate features. Her tusks were tiny, barely visible bumps, and she was larger than a human infant but smaller than a full-blooded orc. She was a perfect blend of both her parents, something entirely new and beautiful. "She is gorgeous," Xander breathed, cradling his daughter carefully while Grukara rested. "Look what we made." "She is ours," Grukara said, exhausted but radiant. "Our little miracle." They named her Ilara, after Xander's grandmother, and with a name that worked in both human and orcish pronunciation. She was healthy and strong, with a powerful set of lungs that she demonstrated frequently in those first days. Caring for a newborn in their isolated valley was challenging, but they managed, learning as they went and supporting each other through the sleepless nights and endless concerns. Watching Grukara with their daughter, Xander fell in love with her all over again. She was gentle and fierce in equal measure, protective of their child in a way that was both tender and absolutely terrifying to anyone who might threaten her. And seeing himself reflected in his daughter's eyes, a perfect blend of two peoples who were supposed to be enemies, filled him with a hope he had not known he could feel. As Alara grew from infant to toddler, the valley became filled with the sounds of her laughter and curiosity. She was a happy child, adventurous and bold, with her mother's strength and her father's tendency to ask endless questions. She spoke both human common tongue and Orcish, switching between them effortlessly, and she learned to love the wilderness that was her home. They told her stories of where she came from, of how her parents met on a battlefield and chose love over war, of the journey that brought them to this valley. She grew up knowing she was special, a bridge between two peoples, and that her existence was proof that peace was possible. Years passed peacefully in the valley. Xander and Grukara built a life that was rich and full, raising their daughter and cultivating their land. They occasionally made trips to distant settlements to trade for supplies they could not make themselves, always carefully choosing places where they were unlikely to encounter anyone who might recognize them or cause trouble. They heard news of the outside world in bits and pieces, peace holding between humans and orcs, though tensions remained high in many areas. New settlements pushing further into frontier territories, occasional conflicts, but nothing like the war that had brought them together. They considered their isolated valley the best kind of existence, a place where they could live according to their own rules, raising their daughter to be kind and strong and unafraid of being different. It was not the life either of them had imagined, but it was better than anything they could have planned. One summer evening, when Alara was 5 years old, they sat together on their porch watching her play in the meadow, chasing butterflies with the intensity only a child could muster. Grukara leaned against Xander and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, a gesture as natural as breathing after so many years together. "You remember the day we met?" Grukara asked. "Every detail. You scared the hell out of me, even wounded and chained. You let me go. I still do not fully understand why. Because killing you would have been easy, and I was tired of easy cruelty. Because your eyes held something, I recognized exhaustion with the whole brutal system we were trapped in." He paused. "And maybe because some part of me already knew you were going to be important to me, though I did not understand it then. Fate, maybe, or maybe just two people recognizing something in each other that no one else saw." He kissed her temple. "Either way, I am grateful every day that I made that choice. As am I. Everything good in my life came from that moment of mercy on a battlefield." She gestured toward Alara, "including her." They watched their daughter in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of shared life and deep understanding. Finally, Grukara spoke again. "I want another child." Xander looked at her in surprise. "Really, really. Alara should have a sibling. And I want to give you more children, build the family we both deserve. Then let us do it. Let us fill this valley with our children and show the world that love is stronger than hate, that peace is possible even between peoples who were taught to be enemies." Grukara turned to kiss him, deep and lingering and full of promise. "I love you, Xander Donovan. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else saw only an enemy. I love you, Grukara. Thank you for trusting me when you had every reason not to. Thank you for building this life with me." Alara's laughter rang out across the meadow, bright and pure, and they both smiled. Their daughter represented everything they had fought for, not on the battlefield, but in the quiet, difficult work of choosing love over fear, of building rather than destroying. She was proof that different peoples could come together, that the boundaries that divided them were artificial constructs that could be overcome with courage and compassion. As the sun set over their valley, painting everything in shades of gold and rose, Xander held his bondmate close and watched their daughter play. They had started as enemies on a battlefield, both expecting to die that day, neither knowing that mercy and kindness would transform their lives so completely. They had faced prejudice and danger and isolation, had given up everything they knew for a chance at happiness, and it had been worth every sacrifice. They had built something beautiful together, something that would outlast them in the form of their children and the love they had proven possible. And as night fell and they called Alara inside, gathering together as a family in their cabin filled with warmth and laughter, Xander knew with absolute certainty that he would make the same choices again without hesitation. He had loosened an orc's tight bindings after battle and told her to run. That single act of mercy had led him here, to this life, to this family, to a happiness he had never imagined possible. She was home now, safe, and so was he. They had found in each other what they had both been seeking: acceptance, love, and a place to belong. And that was worth more than any kingdom, any land, any fortune. It was worth everything. The title mentions the specific moment when Xander loosened Grukara's tight bindings after the battle. But I realize I established early in the story that she had chains on her wrists, rather than showing the actual moment of him loosening bindings and saying those exact words. Let me continue with a scene that brings that precise moment to life more fully, even as a memory or reflection, to ensure the title's promise is completely fulfilled. Later that night, after Alara was asleep and they lay together in bed, Grukara ran her fingers along the faint scars that still marked her wrists. "Do you know what I remember most clearly about that day we met? Tell me. The moment you knelt beside me in the mud. I was certain you were going to kill me. I had seen what soldiers did to captured enemies. But instead, you started working at the chains." Her voice grew soft with remembered emotion. "They had been on for so long they had cut deep into my wrists, and every movement sent pain shooting up my arms. When you finally got them loose and pulled them away, I could breathe properly for the first time in weeks." Xander remembered it too, though he had not spoken of it often. The chains had been cruelly tight, clearly meant to restrict and hurt rather than simply restrain. His hands had been shaking from his own wound, making it difficult to work the bindings loose, but he had persisted because he could see how much pain they were causing her. "You said something to me," Grukara continued, "when you finally got them off and I was about to run." "Do you remember what it was?" He did, though the memory was hazy with pain and adrenaline. "I said breathe. You are safe now. No, you said breathe, you are home now, safe. At the time I did not understand what you meant. How could I be home on a battlefield surrounded by enemies? But I understand now." She turned to look at him in the darkness. "You were telling me that freedom was home, that safety was home, that I could find home anywhere I could breathe freely, and you were right. I do not think I was that philosophical in the moment. I was bleeding and scared and making a crazy decision. Maybe. But those words stayed with me through everything that came after. When my clan cast me out and I was alone in the wilderness, I would repeat them to myself. Breathe, you are home now, safe. It became a promise I made to myself that I would find a place where those words were true." "And did you find that place?" She pressed her forehead to his, a gesture of intimacy they had made their own. "I found it with you. Wherever we are together, I can breathe freely. That is home. That is safety." Xander held her close, overwhelmed by the weight of what she was saying. I love you, more than I have words to express. I know. I feel it in everything you do every day. That is why I can breathe. They fell asleep wrapped together, at peace in the home they had built from nothing but love and determination. Outside, the valley slept under stars that had witnessed the beginning of their impossible love story and would witness its continuation for years to come. Time moved on as it always does. They welcomed a second child, a son they named Kale, who had more of his father's features but his mother's warrior spirit. Then a third, another daughter named Mira, who was the perfect balance of both parents. Their cabin expanded to accommodate their growing family, and the valley rang with the sounds of children playing and growing. Xander taught his children to read and write, to farm and build, to see all people human, orc, or otherwise as worthy of respect and kindness. Grukara taught them to hunt and track, to understand the wilderness, to be proud of their heritage from both sides. Together, they raised children who were confident in themselves, who knew they were loved unconditionally, who would grow up to be bridges between peoples rather than walls. News from the outside world continued to filter in occasionally. The peace between humans and orcs remained fragile but holding. Some settlements were even beginning to allow mixed communities, though prejudice remained strong in many areas. Xander and Grukara sometimes talked about returning to civilization, about showing their family to the world as proof that love could transcend boundaries, but they always decided against it. Their peace was precious, and they would not risk their children's safety for a symbolic gesture. Besides, they were happy here, profoundly, deeply happy in a way neither had ever expected to be. They had everything they needed: each other, their children, their land, and the freedom to live according to their own values. Years became decades. Their children grew into adults, strong and capable, eventually leaving the valley to make their own ways in a world that was slowly becoming more accepting of people like them. Elara became a healer, traveling between human and orc settlements, offering her services to any who needed them. Kale became a ranger, protecting the frontier lands and helping to mediate disputes between different peoples. Mira chose scholarship, studying the histories of both humans and orcs, and working to promote understanding through education. Xander and Grukara were immensely proud of all of them, of the people they had become and the good they were doing in the world. Their children were living proof that the cycle of hatred could be broken, that a new generation could choose cooperation over conflict. As they aged, Xander's hair turning gray and Grukara's strength gradually diminishing, though she remained formidable. They spent more time sitting on their porch watching the valley that had been their sanctuary for so many years. They told each other old stories, relived favorite memories, and marveled at the unlikely path that had brought them together. If you could go back, Grukara asked one evening when they were both well into their later years, and change things, would you? Not a single moment. Every choice led me here to you, to this life. I would not trade it for anything. Not even for an easier path, one where we did not have to hide, where our love was celebrated instead of forbidden. Not even then. We built something precious precisely because it was difficult. We proved that love is stronger than hate, that peace is possible even when everyone says it is not. That matters more than ease or acceptance. Grukara leaned her head on his shoulder, the gesture as natural after 40 years together as it had been after 4 months. You loosened my bindings and set me free, but in doing so you freed yourself too. We freed each other. We did. And we built a family, a life, a future that neither of us could have imagined. That is not bad for two people who met as enemies on a battlefield. Not bad at all. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over their valley one more time, casting everything in golden light. Their children would visit soon, bringing grandchildren who were growing up in a world slightly more accepting than the one their parents had known. The change was slow, but it was real, and Xander and Grukara had been part of making it happen simply by living their truth and raising their children to do the same. That night, curled together in the bed they had shared for so many years, Xander held Grukara close and whispered, "You are home now." "Safe. Always. Always," she agreed, and in her voice was all the love and contentment of a life well lived. Their story could have ended in violence on that battlefield decades ago. Instead, it became a story of love, of courage, of choosing compassion over cruelty even when it was difficult. They had built something beautiful together, starting from nothing but mutual mercy, and growing into a family and a legacy that would outlast them both. They had proven that bindings could be loosened, that enemies could become lovers, that home was not a place but a person. That safety came from being truly known and accepted. Their love had been revolutionary not because it was perfect, but because it existed at all, because they had refused to let fear and prejudice dictate their lives. And as they drifted toward sleep, still wrapped in each other's arms after all these years, they both knew with absolute certainty that they had made the right choice. Every sacrifice had been worth it. Every difficulty had been overcome. They had found in each other what everyone seeks: a place to belong, a person to love, a life worth living. The chains that had bound Grukara that day on the battlefield had been physical, but they represented so much more: the chains of war, of prejudice, of expectation, of fear. When Xander loosened them and told her to breathe, that she was home and safe, he had been speaking a truth neither of them fully understood yet. Freedom was home. Love was home. Acceptance was home. And they had found it together, built it together, and would cherish it together for whatever time they had left. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.